Try to imagine Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton showing up, and you're 4 years old.
When I tell you that my club photographer was Linda Eastman, she was one of the most beautiful people in the world, shooting all the time, shooting pictures. My head waitress, I'll never forget her, was Cass Elliot. Hello.
Come back with us in time to when a New York pretzel was only a nickel and an obscure and campy named underground Greenwich Village nightclub, Cafe A Go-Go, became the epicenter for everything cool. It was a social vortex. This is the story of Elly, Howard, Lenny, and the Cafe A Go-Go.
To Tell the Truth presents the youngest woman nightclub owner in the United States, Elly Solomon.
Thank you, and I'd like you to meet my husband, impresario, Howard Solomon.
Howard Solomon was one of the unsung heroes of the 60s. Howie was always at his happiest, constantly challenging authority and standing up for the little guy.
The city of New York was very against opening new clubs that they could not effectively control.
This is the true story of a young married couple who started the Go-Go on a whim and a prayer.
I always enjoyed being around show people, and I wanted to house them all in one spot, so I built it.
You mean you built it like with a hammer and everything?
Yes.
And struggled for 7 years trying to keep the doors open, barely making a living.
Walking down on the street.
And how they unwittingly helped shape the comedy and music scene during the turbulent 1960s.
I wanted to open a theater cabaret, one that would not serve any hard liquor.
I really didn't think about it as being famous or anything like that. It was a dream that I had had from the time I was about 13. It was supposed to be a coffee house, but it turned into the Cafe A Go-Go.
The club opened in February 1964 with acts like Professor Irwin Corey, Mort Saul, and Stan Getz. It attained hipness that November when Lenny Bruce and owner Howard Solomon were convicted of obscenity for one of the performances there.
He said, hey, this guy, you're like him. I'd never even heard of Lenny Bruce, so I didn't know, what do you mean I'm like him? So I went down to the Village Vanguard and I watched him. I walked out. I didn't think it was funny at all. Well, a couple of years later, of course, I'm worshiping the guy.
The most shocking comedian of our time, a young man who is skyrocketing to fame, Lenny Bruce.
I just felt that there would be no way that we could ever get arrested for presenting an artist of this caliber. I had been to nightclubs before, and I had seen Joey Ross and Frank Sinatra, and they had used the language of the streets, and I didn't in any way think that this man could be prosecuted or persecuted for this, so my instinct was to fight the battle.
The couple both got busted.
I was booked with Lenny Bruce, fingerprinted, and I was put in a cell with about 3 or 4 prostitutes.
And then I did get busted for saying the word schmuck by a Yiddish undercover agent. That's the truth. He used the term fressing. Fressing is Yiddish for eating. Eating means an act of oral copulation.
That historic arrest would catapult these 3 social misfits into New York folklore.
Lenny came over to me, took me aside, and said, I've got to ask, do you ever tell an artist what colors to choose from his palette? And I said, absolutely not. He said, well, have you decided whether or not to let me go on?
I said, well, you know what? You're going on, and I'll risk it. And we did. We got arrested again for the 2nd time. But that was okay, because in the back of my mind, freedom of speech will always prevail.
We felt that we were a voice that would lead the way to the contemporary freedom of speech and allow comedy to go into another dimension. The Lenny Bruce trial and the Lenny Bruce arrest literally put the Cafe Au Go-Go on the map all over the world.
James Cotton.
We had amazing artists come in, I mean, from all over the country. All these different incredible people that came out of the woodwork. You know, they were just like lost in time. If you were to see it, I mean, there wasn't a seat to be had, standing room only, lines waiting outside, and the music, it was like, there was no intermissions, really. It was one entertainer after the other, and the kids, I don't know if those kids ever even had heard that music. It was a happening. It was the blues bag happening. And Howard, oh my God, he was like walking on a cloud. You know, he big smile, this one, smile, that one.
Fred Neil was a Greenwich Village staple, mostly remembered today as the songwriter who wrote Everybody's Talking for the Academy Award-winning film Midnight Cowboy, who was one of the first musicians to integrate folk, jazz, and blues in his own style. He was also managed by the Cafe Au Go-Go owner, Howard Solomon.
Marcy in a coat of flowers stops inside a candy store.
I remember Jimi Hendrix being at the Cafe Au Go-Go.
At that time, he was known as Jimmy James and the Flame. He was virtually a nobody.
Jimmy James was itching to make the London scene and become part of the early electric rock explosion. Howie fronts Jimmy the bread for his England trip, and James returns to the States a year later as Jimi Hendrix.
Hey, Joe, where you going with that gun of yours?
He was so grateful that we had sent him to London, and he became so popular.
Hey, fantastic sounds, real psychedelic sounds from the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Richie Havens was not even known yet.
At the end of the era, Richie Havens would later go on to perform at Woodstock and sing the iconic impromptu song, Freedom. That song, that phrase, became a rallying cry to a whole hippie nation who would go on to challenge the status quo and help dismantle the Vietnam War through countless protest marches nationwide.
I was interested in developing entertainers. To heck with being the youngest nightclub owner in the world. Finding these incredible people that was so gifted, that had a couple of pennies in their pocket and needed a place to work out their craft.
The most legendary event in the rock and roll history of the Cafe Au Go-Go was the Cream's two-week stand. With a hot album and rising buzz, the Cream was booked into the tiny 400-seat club. Eric Clapton and Jack Bruce had substantial Marshall amplifiers designed to fill larger halls, and they were plainly audible from the street. Steve Van Zandt, long before his membership with Bruce Springsteen and the Sopranos, remembers standing outside the sold-out shows and listening to the ear-splitting roar of Clapton's guitar from Bleecker Street. The Butterfield Blues Band sent out a musical shockwave that white musicians could play the blues, and 1,000 bands were formed over the next couple of years worldwide. Oh, and a young comic first hit the go-go stage that November. His name was Richie Pryor.
Richie Pryor, he used to call me his princess. Not princess, but his princess.
And you have 3 children?
3 children.
Oldest is
8.
Youngest?
6.
No, 3,
Wow.
5 months.
That was fast.
My parents lived a totally different life. It wasn't 9 to 5. Each night that they had to go to work, a new babysitter would come in to babysit me, and one time it was Donovan. I had everyone from the Mothers of Invention except for Frank Zappa. I remember Tiny Tim coming and babysitting me one night.
We kind of grew up in the club. that was our second home. When I would finish school, my dad would pick me up on his Harley, and we'd drive all around Greenwich Village.
Greenwich Village was one of the most special places in the world. It was the Paris of New York, where people were afraid to even come there because supposedly us villagers were so strange. We were the weirdos, but weren't we the most fantastic weirdos in the whole world?
Dreams and schemes and being proud to say I love you, I have vowed.
I went to the opening of the World's Fair. I was Salvatore Dali's guest. His wife, Nina, was in Spain at the time. I was on Salvatore Dali's arm, entering into the Spanish pavilion. How I got to meet Salvatore Dali, I don't even remember. It just seemed like to happen out of a fairy tale.
Monday night at the Go-Go was the slowest night of the week. A show opened called The Happening. The Happening is 60s speak for what would now be called performance art or experimental theater. It was the brainchild of Yoko Ono. Slicker operations, like B.B. King and Albert King, played for their first white New York audiences. One night, B.B., deeply grateful for the career boost he'd been given, brought up Butterfield blues guitarist Mike Bloomfield to jam. Bloomfield managed to trade 10 minutes of exquisite licks with the Chicago master. 1968. Howie and Bill Graham decided to team up and co-produce a concert in the Central Park Mall. By mid-afternoon, 20,000 screaming fans showed up for this historic free blowout concert to hear Jefferson Airplane, The Grateful Dead, and Paul Butterfield Blues Band groove until dawn.
I can't take it now. My heart is carrying such heavy load. One more 8-foot break, just like a camel with a heavy pack.
The times were a-changing. Bill Graham's Fillmore East blew into the village with a vengeance. The majority of the bands were staunchly loyal to their go-go roots. But once the Fillmore East opened their doors, it was considered a lot more appealing to be second on the Fillmore bill than headlining over at the Go-Go. And what was once considered hip, not having a bar or serving liquor, was beginning to take its financial toll on Howard and Elly.
We saw magic down there. There was absolute magic going on for many years. You know, the village changed. It just changed from one incredible, marvelous place into a circus. You don't want to give it up, and then you just have to. And it's time to go, so I had to close the club.
7 years, 2,555 days and nights. Howie and Elly barely scratched out a living and kept the Go-Go running on a whim and a prayer. To this day, it's shocking to think they did it all without serving a drop of liquor, a prehistoric concept by today's standards. Throughout the turbulent 60s, the Cafe A Go-Go remained a powerful beacon in the night for many a disenfranchised artist who made their pilgrimage to this Greenwich Village mecca and were welcomed with open arms as they passed under the Go-Go awning.